don't forget your booties because it's cold out there. Happy Groundhog Day, everybody. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Mr. Small's Theater. I am Matt Geica, and you are listening to or watching The River's Edge, found at riversedgepgh.com. Brian Crawford producing. As always, this is my weekly show. It's called Geik's Got Game. We talk sports, yeah, but we also go far afield in other directions too, how sports intersects with life and culture and our day-to-day experiences as human beings, basically, is how I try to tie it all together. And yeah, we'll dig in deep into the details. I love the details. I love the X's and O's. I love the dollars and cents when it comes to pro sports and fitting things under a salary cap, talking about all sorts of really nerdy things that hardcore sports fans like myself are all about. Really, that's what we think about a lot during the day. But also, I do want to get away from the traditional sports talk cliches, and I hope I've done that in my 2+ years, going on 3 years here on the network. Coming up later in the show, my featured guest will be talking about pirates and another kind of pirates. Noted Florida man Adam Berry of MLB.com. He's the Pittsburgh Pirates beat reporter. That's one kind of pirates. And he'll also be discussing what I saw down in Tampa last weekend for the NHL All-Star Game, the pirate-themed Gasparilla Festival. It seemed like it was a scene that belonged more on the Allegheny than down there on Tampa Bay. But we'll get into exactly why that's a thing down there. And also, we'll try to get into what the heck the Pirates are doing this offseason. Are they rebuilding? Are they retooling? Are they just rolling it over? Are they cutting salary? What is the motivation behind this offseason? I think Adam's about as good of a person to talk to when it comes to defining that. Also, later on, we have a momentous occasion coming up in Pittsburgh sports next week. Tuesday night, the Vegas Golden Knights pay their first visit ever to PPG Paints Arena and the city of Pittsburgh. Why does it matter? Well, there's an old friend. Well, there's a few old friends on the Vegas Golden Knights, the story of the NHL season in my view. But with Marc-Andre Fleury likely to start that night against, you would imagine, Matt Murray, the student against the teacher, if you will. Should there be any remorse from the Penguins in how they handled that goaltending situation? Yes, hindsight is 20/20, and maybe we can't even get a great look at the whole situation yet because we're only a half season or so into this new era of goaltending in Pittsburgh for the Penguins. But hey, that's what this is all about, right? We discuss it, we see what we can determine, and we'll try to figure out if the Penguins did make the wrong move or if this was the prudent move to go with youth in net. Also, I'll kill a cliche to conclude the program, as I always do, and it'll be related to the world of employment and the world of sports, two things that converge quite a bit in my world this week. Before I get into the meat of today's program, though, you can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, and in fact, if you're watching on Facebook Live, you see the tag, Matt Geica Media, MattGajTKA, and also I'm on Twitter at Matt Geica. And it's been an eventful week for me. I'll start there. I am no longer employed by DKPittsburghSports.com. I have removed myself from that situation, and if you search DK Deadspin, you see what Deadspin exposed about my former boss, Dejan Kovacevic, at the website. I no longer wish to be affiliated with all that's going on there. And like I said, you'll see why if you do look that up. So, well, speaking of sports cliches or sports terminology, I'm a free agent now, and I'm exploring my options in the sports media world. And since I announced my resignation on Monday afternoon upon my return from the NHL All-Star Game, I've had some time to think, as you would imagine. Actually, I've been unexpectedly busy. I forgot how busy one is when one is looking for employment. It's almost like they say, a full-time job to get a full-time job, or to at least fill out your day with gainful employment. It's been a few years since I've been in this situation, and I have to say, number one, it is liberating to be able to say that I could do whatever I want. Well, whatever options are available to me. I can't go be president of the United States. Not that I would want to do that right now, but hey, I'm eligible in a couple of years. 2020 is my first one over the age of 35. But the point being that there are all of a sudden all these avenues open, and I have found it very freeing and energizing this week, and really quite relieving to be free of what was a very difficult situation for me over the past few weeks from a moral and a personal standpoint. So to break free of that conflict, to get out of Shawshank, as it were. It has been beautiful this week. But at the same time, I've wondered, do I want to stay in sports media full time? Do I want to diversify? I've had some offers in some different directions. And ever since I was a kid, well, not a kid, but ever since I was maybe 16, I realized that sports media was where I wanted to go. I got an internship at the local radio station. I grew up in Weirton, West Virginia, so it was WEIR AM, and I was a statistician and a color analyst for my high school's basketball and football games. So I didn't play those sports in high school. I was already on the air helping out to produce a good radio broadcast, and I felt like we did a really good job there. Shout out to Mike Guerin and Al Beniti for helping a young man get his start in the business. Then I went on to Marshall University, dug into everything related to media, the newspaper, the radio station primarily, and also our TV station there. So it's been a while since I had any other thoughts about going into any other sort of career. And yeah, I have other interests. I like music. I enjoy exercise. I've thought about personal training, I guess, in a few fleeting moments over the course of my lifetime, but never anything seriously. I'm big into my faith as well, raised Catholic, remain a Christian, so I've thought about avenues in that way too. But overall, I just feel like my skill set is best tailored toward this. Why would you do something that you have to relearn or retrain yourself in order to fit into that new field? That's the way I feel about it. And I know that has been forced upon people in this area, really, when you look back at the last 30, 40 years when the steel industry went out of town or became much less of a viable option for people. People had to retrain themselves. And in my hometown of Weirton, West Virginia, you had Weirton Steel thrive for so long, but then gradually going downhill due to international competition, due to other market forces that were really out of any of our control. So you go into the service industry, maybe you find a job up here in Pittsburgh in a burgeoning tech culture, and fingers crossed that Amazon decides that maybe they want to make Pittsburgh the home of their second headquarters. Wouldn't that be a boon for this area? But just the idea that Pittsburgh's in the running for that wouldn't have been a consideration at all 10 or 15 years ago. You see Google have an office. You see Uber use us as a test market for their self-driving cars. So there is a real forward momentum here in Pittsburgh, and reinvention can be, like I just mentioned, rejuvenating. But overall, there is a comfort level, and there is a thought. I always try to be analytical in what I do and not let emotions take over too much, and not just let the idea that I could do anything push me in a direction where I might have some regrets in the future. So I'm thinking I want to stay in sports media. I want to stay in this field. And I've gotten so much good feedback from folks after my departure at DK Pittsburgh Sports saying that they would like to see me stay in it. So that helps too. It helps to know that other people believe what you believe in your heart of hearts, that this is the spot for you. But I often think about, is there even any going back to how it used to be for me in my relationship with sports? Can I be a fan again? Just be a fan. And I'm still just a fan, quote unquote, in certain areas like the world of golf. Yes, I covered the U.S. Open for DK Pittsburgh Sports when it came to Pittsburgh and Oakmont Country Club 2 years ago, and what a thrill that was. Check that off the bucket list for sure. Just to go to a U.S. Open. I was in almost a fan mentality there. Don't get me wrong, I executed my duties as a journalist first and foremost, but yeah, I was giddy to see guys like Dustin Johnson and Ricky Fowler and all the players that I see on TV, to see them up close, tackling one of the toughest courses in America, toughest courses in the world, one of the best courses in the world, right in my backyard here in Pittsburgh. It was spectacular. And my fan if you will, my fan passion for golf fueled the coverage there that week. And really, I think in my time in this market, going on 4 years this summer, my passion that was born from being a fan, first and foremost, of hockey or baseball or even football, which, as I mentioned, I've drifted away from recently. But all these things that I followed through the Pittsburgh teams, in addition to golf, in addition to tennis, another sport I'm passionate about, that all has given me the motivation and I think the knowledge and the appreciation for these sports that made what I put out there better than what just a random journalist would have produced if put in these spots. Now, don't get me wrong. There are basic tenets of journalism or covering sports, if you want to put it that way, that translate to news and to sports and to entertainment, excuse me, or whatever else that you want to get into from a media perspective. But if you are a sports fan, I think it does help you. I really believe that in covering things, and also relating to the fans who are at home, the fans who can't be where you are, who can't be at the ballpark or the arena or the stadium, who can't go into the locker room or the clubhouse and try to figure out exactly what such and such person was thinking on this play, or why the heck the manager bunted in the 8th inning, et cetera, et cetera. I've gotten a chance to ask those questions. I don't take that for granted, and I believe my previous position as a fan and having a passion for it and wanting the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Pittsburgh Steelers to all win, I think that gives me an idea of where you, the fan, are coming from. If you are indeed a sports fan watching this show, and you probably are, if you do tune in to Geiks Got Game on a regular basis. So I don't know if you can really separate it. And there is a group of sports reporters who I think go above and beyond in trying to nail down the fact and trying to elaborate and reiterate that they are not fans and they separate themselves. I call BS on that. I don't feel like that's necessarily even a good thing, in fact, because if you separate yourself so much from your former fan self, which I'm assuming most people in sports media were fans first, then you're not going to understand where the fans and the consumers are coming from, so you can't quite serve them well. So in that way, the two worlds, being a fan, being in sports media, are tightly intermingled. But also, I feel like I can't go back. I have gone too far in the analytical direction. I've become too much of a reporter or an analyst to completely go all the way and just root for the home team like I used to, because I'm always thinking. The brain is always churning now. What's the story angle? Who should I talk to? What stats should I look up to try to illuminate a particular argument? You can't turn these things off, and I find that I enjoy that side of it just as much as I used to enjoy being a fan. Now, there are certain vicarious, carefree joys of being a fan that you can't quite capture in any kind of employment situation, or even if this is just a passion project and you're not getting paid at all. For instance, I broadcast Peters Township High School hockey games. I emceed their senior night last night down in Cannonsburg, and it's been quite the experience. I don't get paid for that. I just have an addiction to calling play-by-play, to being the voice of something, to being the voice of a team, which was born from listening to Mike Lang call Penguins games growing up, or Bill Hillgrove on the Steelers, or Greg Brown and Lanny Fratteri on the Pirates. And that, I decided, was something that I wanted to do. That was a passion of mine. I can't go back to just being a fan. In fact, when I was a kid, when I was in the stands at, say, Mellon Arena or at PNC Park or Three Rivers Stadium, I would catch myself under my breath calling play-by-play for these games, and my friends would call me on it and make fun of me relentlessly. So it almost feels like a destiny to be in sports media in that way. So while it sounds appealing in some ways to just detach myself intellectually from these things and just go back to being a diehard fan like I was in my teenage years and maybe my early 20s as well, there were still some aspects of that as I made the transition from fan to journalist / broadcaster, whatever you want to say. I can't do it. I don't think I can make the jump back. And that's a sobering thought in some ways, to say that you feel like it's impossible. Maybe if I spent 10 years out of the business, I'd have an easier time and I'd make that transition back. But overall, I don't think it's possible for me. I believe my mindset was always angled toward getting to this point once I reached a certain age or a certain level of intellectual maturity. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying you're stuck with me if you want to follow sports media. And I would love to stay in Pittsburgh. I believe in this city. Not to get too melodramatic, but it's a part of me. I was born just over here to my left as I look out over the Allegheny River here from Mr. Small's Theater. I was born at McGee Women's Hospital. Pittsburgh's been a part of me since I was a day old. It's my first moments out of the womb. And even though I grew up in Weirton, West Virginia, about a 40-minute drive from here in Millvale, I've always felt Pittsburgh was my co-hometown, if you will. I don't want to say true hometown because I do feel a connection to the home state and the home city. But overall, Pittsburgh was where I wanted to be, and covering and being a part of Pittsburgh sports was where I wanted to be. So I'm going to try like hell, as I've said on social media, to stick around here and to try to bring my perspective to it, because I think people appreciate it, but also because, frankly, I don't feel I have a choice in the matter. So We'll step aside here on Gike's Got Game as I try to digest that. When I come back, good friend of mine and a former, I guess you'd call it, competitor on the Pirates beat, Adam Berry of MLB.com will join me to talk about something that's gotten a lot of fans fired up this winter. Yes, we are talking baseball because of the anger and the distaste in the air for what the Pirates are doing and where the heck they're going. Also, I'll get Adam's perspective on a really insane, I thought, event, but insane in a good way, that I witnessed last week in Tampa, Florida. This is The River's Edge, and you're listening to Gike's Got Game.
Hey, it's Mike Sasson. Guess what? You used to love us at 10. You're going to love us even more at 9. It's me. It's Alex. It's funniness. It's guests. It's all sorts of me yelling into microphones only 1 hour earlier. It's exactly what you need at 9 o'clock. It's like a shot of adrenaline. It's the Mike Sasson Show, now starting at 9 o'clock on Tuesday on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio.
Back inside Mr. Small's Theater in Millvale, this is Matt Geica, and you are listening to and watching The River's Edge. You can find us at riversedgepgh.com, streaming live on our Facebook page, but you can find the portal for the Facebook stream on the website too, and that's where you can also discover all the podcasts, the archives. It's all right there in addition to that live stream. Again, The River's Edge, Pittsburgh station for local original music, a new kind of radio here. Going into the 4th year of The River's Edge, in fact, and in my 3rd year of this program. Talking about, I brought up briefly the Pirates offseason in my opening segment as I kind of danced around the Pittsburgh sports world. A man on the line who can help me out with that on our guest line is Adam Berry, the Pirates beat reporter from MLB.com, and also very relevant to my recent experience in Tampa. Adam is a proud Florida man in many ways, native of Florida, but also a Florida Gator, too. So I suppose, Adam, it applies in 2 different ways for you.
Yeah, and I can maybe help you out with the Pirates offseason. I can definitely help you out with the Florida man stuff.
Well, let's open with that. Gasparilla, if people don't know in Pittsburgh, and they probably don't, although I guess with the All-Star Game being down there this past week, if you're a hockey fan, you probably heard about it. It's this pirate-themed festival. It seems like Tampa's answer to Mardi Gras, with even beads and general debauchery included. Adam, I was blown away. 200,000 people, maybe close to 300,000 people in downtown Tampa for the parade, in which, well, there's some sort of an event where these pirates sail in on a ship, and the mayor of Tampa hands over the key to the city for the weekend. I was amused by it. I was kind of gobsmacked by it, too. I was trying to figure out, how did this ever become such a big deal? And also, how did I not know about this until like 2 years ago? So I suppose you can answer the first question, if not the second.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that actually it doesn't really get national attention. I think they blow it up as like it's one of like the top 5 biggest parades in America or something as far as annual things they do.
Yeah.
It started way back in like the 1900s, and kind of the journalist in me is very proud that like the Tampa Tribune, which is now shut down, the newspaper there, their editor actually like helped make it a thing, and it's not really based off of reality. Jose Gaspar is like a legend and something they just made up.
Yeah.
And then of course, I imagine Tampa people look insane when we say, oh yeah, and then fake pirates come in and steal the key to the city from the mayor, and it's like, why are we doing this? But it's basically just a big excuse to party, which it's actually a whole thing too. They have like a children's parade the week before. They run distance races that I've done in the past, up to I think a half marathon, and then the big debauchery reason to drink on the Saturday parade that you probably witnessed. And then what you didn't probably witness is there's an even more insane parade in the even more insane Ybor City at night.
Yeah.
Called the Night Parade with
man.
a K, which is good punnery. And it's wild. It's insane. Tampa really turns up for Gasparilla. So I can't even imagine the combination of that you saw of like hockey personnel and media and fans, and then just people wearing tattered shorts and eye patches out on Bayshore Boulevard.
I really appreciated it. Well, being from Pittsburgh, I'm used to seeing that at PNC Park in small doses.
True.
With the guys who stand on the rotunda, guys and gals who stand on the rotunda and dress up in garb, and we've seen that for playoff games too. But I had a hard time even getting down to Amalie Arena to pick up my press pass on Saturday morning. All these roads were closed, people in the backs of pickup trucks and houseboats driving down there. it was something else. And I really can't compare it to anything else that I've ever witnessed. Having never been to Mardi Gras, I suppose that'd be the closest thing. And everyone that saw me when I was coming off the plane, when I was getting my rental car, they assumed I was there for Gasparilla, and I'm thinking, well, no. And they called it the Pirates and Pucks weekend, which I appreciated too.
Oh,
yeah, it was nice.
Good.
Yeah, some alliteration as well with all that. So, well, Adam, where exactly are you from in Florida? I always forget. Are you from the Tampa area?
I'm from Clearwater, which is in the Tampa Bay area.
Yeah.
But then right before I moved up here, I lived in South Tampa, which is walking distance from Bayshore. I actually right before I moved up here, I went to my last Gasparilla down there.
All right. Well, the first time I heard about Gasparilla was Joe Madden, the Cubs manager who lives down there, I'm presuming. He talked about Francisco Cervelli showing up to his Gasparilla party dressed as an actual pirate. That was pretty amusing. But at the time, he dropped Gasparilla, and I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea. So I had to look it up.
Yeah, he lives in that area, probably not too far from downtown. It's what's his name? McKay's the Bucks coach's old house that he has down there in the in the Bayshore area, and he has a big Gasparilla party. I think last year it was for wounded soldiers. It was like a whole benefit they charged, and it was for a good cause, but he's dressed up in Pirates gear. Apparently Cervelli stopped by. It's a whole big thing. Big Tampa socialite, which is a thing that exists, event.
Well, speaking of pirates and pirates crossovers, did you see Trevor Williams this week on Twitter? He wants to put an actual pirate ship in the Allegheny. And Adam, I've been talking about that since I was in high school. When they built PNC Park, my friends and I at the lunch table, we said, why don't they put a pirate ship out there? But apparently some people in the city, I was looking at Greg Brown's Twitter account. He fired back and said, unfortunately, he wanted it, as you'd imagine Greg Brown would want it. He had the cannonball coming home run call. But people from the Andy Warhol Museum and the Warhol Trust didn't want that in their backyard, so to speak. So what a missed opportunity, though. I wish that the Pirates could afford to play this up more, couldn't they?
Yeah, I think that'd be fun, or at least having a more prominent, I guess, Jolly Roger than the situation they have going on right now. I think
the situation.
You were just in Tampa. There's a big old pirate ship in Raymond James Stadium for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So even if you don't put it out in the river, which you got to respect Trevor Williams' creativity there, maybe play it up in the rotunda or out in the right field area. I guess there's a kids' playground there, but build that up a little bit more and kind of lean into the Pirates thing. But I think it'd be interesting, something to entertain people at the very least.
Exactly. Well, I think 2 decades ago, people were more afraid of the gimmicky stuff, but now a lot of the kitschy minor league feel has come over to Major League Baseball. All these teams have Star Wars night now. So, yeah, it's not like there's any kind of sacredness left. So if I were in the Pirates marketing department, I would definitely go all in on that. Adam Berry is our guest. Go ahead. Sorry.
Think of the Big Apple in New York in the Mets Mets ballpark.
That's always
it doesn't have to be anything gigantic. It's just like you hit a home run and then the pirate ship cannons go off and you're all set.
Adam Berry is our guest. We were here ostensibly to talk about baseball, so we shall do that now as we work our way gradually back from the nonsense, the lovely nonsense of Gasparilla. Well, speaking of nonsense, Adam, do you believe in the idea that this is just a retool for the Pirates? What exactly are they doing this offseason? Because I'll admit I was behind them trying to restructure and build around a younger core as opposed to the McCutchens and even the Garrett Coles, even though he's not that old, but to try to angle for down the road. But I'm not sure they have done enough in this offseason to get to that point. And I'm certain that they have taken away from their World Series and their playoff chances with their moves, despite what Neil Huntington might have said in the press conference after trading McCutchen. So how do you make heads or tails of what the direction is of this team going into 2018?
Yeah, I think for all the stuff that's been going on as far as, criticisms of ownership and everything, the biggest question to me and the most valid criticism is still just what's the direction, like you're asking? Because I agree. At the winter meetings, I said I thought they'd be better off rebuilding. The one thing Neil Huntington said that's just absolutely true is what they did the last 2 years did not work. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about it in person, the fact that it's not just that they didn't spend. The core also wasn't as productive as it was in 2015. It wasn't just that John Neese and Ryan Vogelsong and Juan Nicasio and all that were in the rotation in 2016. It was McCutchen, it was Cole, it was Cervelli. Last year it was Marte. It's been the absence of Gung. It's been everything, basically. So I can't blame them at all for deciding that it's time to rebuild or retool or however you want to put it. I think that's fine. You're not going to beat the Cubs. You're not going to beat the Cardinals. The wild card pool is really crowded right now in the NL, especially if the Brewers are going all in. So, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, maybe even 2 or 3 years down the line, there's going to be an opening. So I think in theory, the idea of rebuilding is fine. The question that you have is now they've gone out and they've made these trades mostly for major league ready or soon to be major league ready talent without a ton of upside. Like they have potential. Colin Moran could be an everyday third baseman, which is valuable. The bullpen guys could be really good in front of Rivero. That's obviously important. But they haven't really said, all right, this is going to be, when's the next clear window? When's the next time you look at this team and say, this is when they could be the best team in the division, like they had at least the potential to be in 2013, 14, and 15. And I think that's really my biggest question. I can understand the desire to retool and be competitive in 2018 and contending in 2019. But I don't know if I see that right now unless they go out and they make some bolder trades or bigger investments in free agency, which, to be fair, it seems like nobody is doing right now except the Brewers. And then maybe you say, all right, they're going to come up as the Cardinals and Cubs come down a little bit. But it's just hard to see that based on the roster they have right now, unless all these guys that they've been counting on, Polanco, Meadows, Glasnow, et cetera, really come into their own and then kind of reach that star level, because it's just sort of hard to see that star potential, that they had in McCutchen, that they had in Cole, coming into play anytime soon.
The central conceit of the Neil Huntington concept has been to keep the competitive window open. Have the past 2 years proven that to be unsustainable in the current environment with what they're willing to spend? Or is it just a matter of execution? Could it be done? Could you, figuratively at least, compete for 10 straight years and always have a decent chance of making the playoffs without going through the ebbs and the flows? It seems like the Milwaukee Brewers buy more into the ebbs and the flows situation, where now they're pouring money into it, making a run at Yu Darvish and making trades, signing guys. Or is that perhaps too much all eggs in one basket for your taste as a smaller market, smaller revenue team?
I think I get the argument for both, and I actually kind of saw what Neil Huntington was saying, the idea that you can keep the window open, and the idea is just get into the playoffs. Basically, if you're aiming for, 86, 87 wins every season, you're probably going to get in, and then you can potentially do that year after year after year. The challenge is, and I think this is what we saw with their payroll, with their market size, with their insistence on playing for the present and future at all times, you just have no margin for error. So then when McCutchen slumps and when Marte gets suspended and Jung Ho doesn't make it and Cervelli's hurt and Polanco doesn't live up to his billing, it turns into 75 and 78 wins, which, you think about it, if just 2 or 3 things had gone right the last couple of years, if McCutchen had gotten off to a better start, if Cole hadn't been injured, so on. If Tony Watson had been better in the closer's role, maybe they were more competitive at the trade deadline, and maybe they took a little bit more of an aggressive approach. Maybe not like, the traditional buyer, but more like 2015, where they add small pieces for mid-level prospects. And so then you keep those guys that keep this sort of competitive window open while still competing every year. But it's just the way that they've had to do it financially is chipping off parts of the core while still trying to compete. So, you're losing Neil Walker after 2015, but you're still trying to compete. And then if something goes wrong, you have less margin for error, because Walker was their 8th best player in 2015. But then all of a sudden you don't have that guy to fall back on. And then Harrison's hurt and Mercer's hurt. And then you just have so little margin for error to me that now I'm kind of coming around to the idea of just go for it when the window's open. Explain to fans that you're rebuilding. Hopefully they'll buy in, like people in Atlanta have, like people in Houston and Chicago did, like the White Sox fans are now, and just make the most of every opportunity you have. And that doesn't seem to be the direction they're heading right now. I'm curious, what it would take to push them in that way.
The problem is when you have that situation trying to explain it to fans, the Pirates have already used up all their political capital, if you will, with the fans. They don't have any spot to go to. Well, bear with us. We'll rebuild here. When fans think that they really haven't committed to the current group in any of their years, whether it be competitive years in 13 through, or we'll call it 12 through 15, because 12 they were in it for a while, or 16 and 17 when things didn't go well and they were on the outside of the playoff picture the whole way. At least, I think, from the fans' perspective, and I talked about this in my opening segment, from my history as a fan back in the day, you think, well, yeah, if they go, if not all in, but if you sense that they're pushing some chips in the middle and then it doesn't work and then it falls back, well, you understand that. I think most intelligent fans understand that part of it. They're not expecting you to be the Yankees and just reload every year and bring in Stanton and whatnot. But to do it the way the Pirates are, it's almost like you can't commit to a full rebuild because you've never committed to a full build up. So they're in a difficult spot, aren't they, with this? And in your mind, one last question for you on the state of the Pirates. Do you think that more of the issue lies with the top-level management, like the decision to not deficit spend, the decision to roll things this way, or is it more on player development, drafting, the old-fashioned stuff that all baseball teams have to have in order to be successful?
Yeah, I think it's really only fair to say both, because I think they feed into each other a little bit in the sense that, ownership is not going to go all in if the idea is from baseball ops is that you're going to be competitive every year. Because then you're saying, oh, how are we going to be competitive next year if we've just kind of shot everything we had right now? So I think the ideas very much feed into each other to the point where I don't necessarily know where to point above all else, because ownership has this mentality and then baseball ops has this mentality, and they line up well right now. The problem is just the last 2 years they've not produced results on the field, and then this offseason it hasn't really been that kind of big turnover, in part because, like you said, they never really went all in, so they didn't have those big pieces to turn around and sell. They had guys nearing free agency who have pretty obvious flaws, so it's not like they were going to go get the Jose Quintana return or the Chris Sale return or somebody else the White Sox probably traded. I think it feeds into each other just a little bit. You say, all right, we're going to be consistent in our spending, and then baseball ops is saying we're going to be consistent in our approach and our goal every year, then you kind of wind up with what you wind up with. And right now it looks like a team that has the potential to be pretty good in 2019 and pretty good in 2022. And just in this kind of, everybody racing to the polls market that the sport is in, I don't know if pretty good is going to get you where you need to go right now.
Well, I lied about one last question. I want to know what you think the final result is for the 18 Pirates, if they don't bring in anyone significant. I know they're reported to be going after Melky Cabrera, perhaps, for an outfield spot. I'm not sure he makes that much of a difference one way or the other, but
no.
Where do you think this finishes up? Are they in the 70s again in wins when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if Marte comes back and he's the guy that he was every other year that he wasn't suspended for PEDs, then that's probably your most valuable player, more valuable than anybody they had last year. Polanco, they're counting on. I think the young pitching staff is kind of underrated at this point. There's a lot of good guys on that staff.
Agreed.
It's
yeah.
pretty deep. I don't know if they're going to score a lot of runs, but they didn't score a lot of runs last year either. So I would say somewhere in the high 70s, maybe somewhere between where they fell in the last 2 years, 75 to 78. But that could change if they go out and they trade for a young outfielder, or they bring in a free agent who bounces back well, or whatever else they do the rest of this offseason that apparently is going to stretch into April.
Indeed, it has been incredibly slow. Teams smartening up, but it hasn't made it very exciting in a lot of ways. Unless you're a Pirates fan, and it's been exciting in maybe some wrong ways for you this year. Adam Berry covers the Pirates extremely well for MLB.com. You can find him on Twitter at Adam D. Berry. He's your expert for Pirates and also other kinds of Pirates, too. So fire away your Gasparilla questions as we prepare for next year's celebration. Maybe I'll make it down, Adam. We'll see.
All right. Road trip.
Yeah, let's do it. That's Adam. I'm Matt. When I come back, we're talking some hockey. Should the Penguins have goaltender remorse with how they handled the situation? Marc-Andre Fleury comes back to town next week. We might as well start talking about it now. This is Gike's Got Game.
Hey, this is David from Pet Clinic, broadcasting from Mr. Small's Theater. You are listening to the River's Edge Radio Network.
Welcome back to Millvale, Pennsylvania. This is Matt Geica. You are listening to and or watching my show, Gike's Got Game. Say that again, Gike's Got Game. Had a little bit of a hiccup there. Coming to you every Friday from 10 to 11 a.m. Brian Crawford's to my left. He's producing the show. Thanks again to Adam Berry of MLB.com for joining me for, as he said, a real conversation on the Pirates. Where are they going? Where have they messed up? It's very reductive to me to just focus in on ownership and spending, when in reality, I think that's letting the baseball operations people off the hook for a concept that may not be viable long term, to try to keep this competitive window open, to try to stay in it, but yet not go all the way in year after year. Yeah, it worked for 3 years. They did well. People overperformed their expectations in some ways, but as a sustainable, competitive concept, as a paradigm, if you will, I'm not sure if that has any credence. I'd like to thank Ryan Connell for chiming in on the Facebook page. And, well, I'll just go down and read his list. He's got a few comments for us, most of them relevant to the Pirates. Ryan asks, how about all the money the taxpayers put forward to build a top 5 ballpark? I'd say top 2, actually, with AT&T in San Francisco, and put the lack of ownership returning the favor to those fans. Hey, Ryan, I'm with you on that. When I was younger and a lot more naive, I thought, hey, why not? Put the taxes toward these stadiums. This is great. Keep the teams in town. And there is value to keeping these teams in town, whether it be a psychic value or real financial, economic value to cities and regions. It's worth considering, but when you look at it from a different perspective, it looks just like sports welfare for these people who don't need welfare. Welfare is good when people need it, but these owners, for the most part, can afford to build these stadiums in other ways and arenas in other ways. So your comment is viable here. If the Pirates aren't putting as much into this team financially as they could, then, yeah, you have a right to be pissed off as a fan base, and I definitely get it. I'm not going to reduce that or minimize that at all. Connell also says, come on, 0-162. Well, we all know the old phrase in baseball, you're going to win 60, you're going to lose 60. It's what you do with the 42 games in between that makes a difference. Now, there are some, I guess, outliers on one side or the other. The LA Dodgers winning, 110 games last year. The Houston Astros of 4 and 5 years ago losing 105, 110, somewhere in that range. But for the most part, even if you're not even trying that hard, you're going to win 60-some-odd games. So they're not going to get to 0-162, but the reference that Ryan made was to the Cleveland Browns, Brian Crawford, who went 0-16 this year, as we know. And thank God. I think that's something for the fan base to at least hang its hat on. Yeah, why do you want to go 1-15? Every bad team has had a 1-15 or a 2-14. To go 0-16, you're there with the 2008 Detroit Lions. That's it. That's the list. That's the only team that's ever
making history.
Been there, right? And I really appreciated seeing the Browns fans throw that fake parade. You know, I forget what they called it, but they marched in a 0 around the stadium to signify the number of wins on the year. I think it was brought to you by there was some sort of Excedrin, I think. The headache medicine, whatever you want to call it. That was one of the sponsors of the parade. It was a fan base laughing at itself, and I can appreciate that as growing up a Pirates fan in the Dave Littlefield era when I felt like there was no direction. We're kind of getting close to that place now, I think, or at least time to start thinking about it. But to see that actually warmed my heart, and that shows you the true passion of Browns fans, right? So many of the players were embarrassed by it. They said, why are you guys doing this? You're making us look like jerks here. But
play better.
Yeah, right. Number one, play better. But number two, these are the diehard fans. These are the guys and gals who are going to show up no matter what, aren't they?
That's true, yeah. It reminds me of when I was in high school and WPIAL, they have what's called the Loser Bowl, where it's not officially called that, but it's basically the teams that really, really suck in football. They put them against each other for one final game, and my hometown team, Norwin, would lose the Loser Bowl every year.
Well, at least if you're going to get to the Loser Bowl, who wants to win the Loser Bowl, right?
Exactly. You want to be the biggest loser.
Right. Well, hey, it worked for NBC for a long time.
Yeah.
You want to be at the extremes in a lot of cases, I think, to set yourself apart. If you're going to lose big. And really, in pro sports, Brian, there's benefit to losing big. You don't want to be where the Pirates are right now, like just out of the playoffs or a few games out of the playoffs, because you don't even get a high draft pick there. At least if you're going to lose and stink like the Houston Astros did, or the Cleveland Browns are currently doing, then at the very least, you have a chance to pick from the top talent in the amateur ranks. Now, we could debate whether that's a fair system, whether it should be like European soccer, where if you lose, you drop out.
Yes, I love that.
You like that?
I love that.
You know what's ironic about that? And I think I've talked about that on this show in the past, but that's actually a more American system than what we have here in America. We have sports socialism in America, whereas in Europe and in other areas around the world, That's more like survival of the fittest. That's Darwinism. That's capitalism.
And what's exciting about that is at the end of the season, the teams that are doing poorly are fighting just as hard, if not harder, than the teams that are competing for a championship, because that's tons of money that they lose out of their pocket if they get relegated to a lower league.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's good for business as a league because it brings urgency to all your games for the most part, unless you're right in the middle.
Exactly.
But a team that is in danger, that's survival, right? The survival instinct is maybe the strongest of all that we have as human beings here. So you can tap into that. And I know that practically it probably doesn't work with the way that we've set up leagues in America, the NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA, because of infrastructure. For instance, in the English Premier League and the level below at the championship, the stadiums aren't that different. You know what I mean? The cities aren't that different in size. So you can have some movement without all these expenditures to try to catch up to, say, if a team comes from the minor leagues here, the Pittsburgh Riverhounds make the MLS. I'm not sure, number one, they can afford to expand the stadium to even meet those qualifications. So there are a lot of situations there that would cause some issues with that.
I think also a lot of times, like the Riverhounds have a deal with a major league soccer team, or at least they did.
Yeah, they have with Columbus.
Yes, so you have a lot of complicated contractual things here in the United States, and I think in some cases the major league team I think they have an ownership stake a lot of times in these
sometimes they do. Not in the case of the Hounds. They're one of the independent teams, but say in hockey, each of the AHL teams, well, all but one, the Chicago Wolves are a holdout, but all but one of the AHL teams, the level below the NHL, are owned or at least have tight affiliation agreements with NHL clubs. And in the case of the Pittsburgh Penguins, they own the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins.
Exactly.
So what do you do with that? I'm not sure that works when you have built this infrastructure, but I guess we can all dream, right? We can look overseas and see a different way to do it.
Exactly. I love it. I think it's wonderful. It makes things very exciting down to the end. I wish we would adopt that system here, because then you wouldn't have a team that it would force teams to spend the money and be competitive, and you can't play games. And it's kind of it's not very entertaining when a team will. I don't think the players intentionally tank games.
No, I don't think players
do. But I do think a lot of times people in the offices will, they'll see that the team's not going to go very far, and they may make trades to maybe put the team in a worse position to try to slide into a draft pick. And
NBA happens all the time, yeah.
You wouldn't see that in a system where you would have a relegation.
Exactly. So it does hurt the fans from that side of it. Thanks, Brian, for your perspective. As always, Brian Crawford, host of River Talk. One of the co-owners here at the River's Edge. We'll take a step out. I'll get to the hockey. We'll talk Marc-Andre Fleury and the Penguins and the Golden Knights and all that in our final segment of Geiks Got Game. Keep it tuned right here.
Brian Crawford letting you know that Kevin Slogic, my State Farm agent in Allison Park, is here to help life go right and reminds you that you're listening to the River's Edge Radio Network.
Back to wrap it up on Geiks Got Game. I am Matt Geika, your amiable host, or at least I try to be. Thanks again to Brian Crawford for producing the show. Thank you to you, first and foremost, for tuning in, if you will. Hard to get away from that terminology, tuning in. You're not tuning anything in. You're logging on, I suppose, in this case. But, hey, old habits die hard in the world of radio and audio. I appreciate Adam Berry joining me to talk some baseball. I want to finish, though, with hockey talk, as Marc-Andre Fleury will bring his Golden Knights into town on Tuesday. Should be a scene rife with emotion at PPG Paints Arena. You know how much most Penguins fans like Marc-Andre Fleury, or love, I should say. It's a really remarkable obsession. And when I was down at the All-Star game, the story I wrote there that had the biggest impact, the most amount of clicks for my former employer, was the story about Fleury winning the goalie portion of the skills competition and just basically being himself, crowd-pleasing, charismatic, fun-loving. He chose the theme song "Let It Go" from Frozen as his backing track for when he was out there on suggestion of his daughters, and also because he felt like it was a good mind frame to be in, to let it go as a goalie at the All-Star game, which, of course, is tailored around offense. So it's all the reasons that you love Marc-Andre. He had the panache, the flair. In addition to, at the end of his career with the Penguins, the last 3 or 4 years, he was rather good. Now, he had ups and downs in his first 6 or 7 years, 8 years in Pittsburgh. But once he got set up with his former goalie coach, Mike Bales, they cleaned up his technique. it was a really nice combination of athleticism and positional soundness. And he's brought that over to the Vegas Golden Knights. He had a concussion ordeal to go through. He had a couple of those in Pittsburgh as well. So something to watch, and you hope that it doesn't crop up again for Marc-Andre. But once he got back from the concussion in December, you'll recall him making a few key saves against the Penguins in the Knights' 2-1 win in mid-December out there at T-Mobile in Vegas. He has one of the top save percentages in all of hockey right now, and the Vegas Golden Knights have already surpassed the record of the Florida Panthers of, 1993, 94, I want to say. I just wrote the story 3 or 4 days ago. I should remember this, but they have already beaten the record for most wins by an expansion team. It's crazy. They have 30-some-odd games to play, and they're already the best expansion team in league history. So what a story for them. Now, the expansion rules were a little bit easier for George McPhee, the GM of the Knights, than they were for previous teams, and the Knights had the benefit of coming in by themselves and not splitting talent with another team, like, say, the Blue Jackets and the Wild had to do in 2000. But neither here nor there. I think everyone out there deserves a lot of credit. And I know there are plenty of Penguins fans who wish that Marc-Andre Fleury could have stayed in town. But I think any idea of goaltender remorse is misplaced in this situation. Understandably so, Matt Murray has struggled for parts of this year. Who knows how far back his dad was sick and how much that influenced him. His father passing away, of course, late last month. And Murray getting back in the cage this past, Tuesday against the Sharks, and not allowing a single even-strength goal. Even-strength save percentage has been a bugaboo for the Penguins this year, whether it's Murray or Tristan Jarry or Casey DeSmith. Well, definitely Antti Niemi, but he's long gone at this point. So the Penguins are in a good spot goaltending-wise. They have 2 rookies vying for the backup spot. Competition always a good thing. In DeSmith, the slightly older guy, and Jarry, more of the prospect, more of the high pedigree guy. And then you have Matt Murray, who won 2 Stanley Cups before even exhausting his rookie eligibility in the NHL. And while I think Murray isn't maybe as skilled as Marc-Andre Fleury was in certain areas and using his hands and getting across the crease quickly, he has as good positionally as there is a goalie in the NHL. And talking to Braden Holtby, the Capitals' great goaltender, former Vezina winner at the NHL All-Star Game, he said Matt Murray and guys of that age have taught some of the old guard, quote-unquote, how to do things, and they've made them reconsider their technique. So Matt Murray's at the cutting edge here of goaltending. It's not the flashiest type of goaltending, and he still has a lot to prove in terms of longevity. I've discussed this on this program in the past, in terms of keeping that level up. And really this year, in terms of rebounding, maybe the league's pushed back. Perhaps it was just the off-the-ice concerns that kept him from really being focused as much as he could. Health has been a problem for Matt Murray too, but with the money that Marc-Andre was making, with where he was in his career, Fleury is now 33. Typically, goalies start to fall off at age 30 and whereabouts. It was the smarter move to hang on to Matt Murray, to go with Tristan Jarry as well as the backup and not trade either one of those guys and hang on to Fleury. I understand the emotional attachment, but I hate to operate in hindsight in this situation. You go with what decision makers knew back when they had to make a move. And in the case of Jim Rutherford, he saw Matt Murray not just anchor a Stanley Cup run in his first year, but also come in and in a situation where it might have been awkward in replacing Fleury, who was playing quite well before Sullivan replaced him in the Eastern Conference Final. Murray was unflappable, and he finished the Stanley Cup Final with back-to-back shutouts. And the team wasn't playing as well in front of him as it did in 2016 either. So there was more for the Penguins goalies to do, both Fleury and Murray, in this past championship run. So I was okay with the move. Murray's still very affordable even after signing that contract extension. And with the Penguins being a cap team, the cap will go up next year by about $5 million, but still, they're going to be butting up against it as long as they have these superstars under contract in Crosby and Malkin and Letang. And how lucky are they that they all signed for, well, at least in the case of Crosby and Malkin, relative bargains. Now, they look like El Cheapo pickups at this point with their production and with where the market is going, as it always does, naturally, onward and upward. So it'll be a worthwhile look back. There will be, I'm sure, tears and sadness from many Penguins fans who wish that their beloved Fleury could have stayed in town. But at the same time, the smart move was to do what the Penguins did. And will it pan out? I don't know, but I don't have an issue with the decision-making process there. We've run out of time here on Geiks Got Game. In fact, we've gone into overtime, appropriately so, with the hockey conversation. Thank you so much for watching and listening and patronizing. Remember, you can find us at riversedgepgh.com, Facebook and Twitter as well. I'm Matt Geica, reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. Talk to you next week, same time, same place, here at here at Mr. Small's Theater in Millvale, Pennsylvania.